All right, everyone. A couple of hours ago, Trump addressed the issue of the Iran strikes, which happened the day before. Iran, of course, launching a number of missiles at U.S. bases. There was damage to the bases, but there were no casualties. No Americans died. No Iraqis died, which is good. These were strikes conducted in Iraq, of course, which we still stubbornly are in. Trump's response was, I thought, extremely good. It was measured. It was what I wanted to hear, which is essentially there won't be a war with Iran. And you got this sort of dick-wagging side of it, like, well, Iran would be well-warned not to do this, and don't antagonize us, we got big missiles and stuff. It's characteristically Trump. The U.S. has been doing that for a long time. That's just big stick diplomacy, ultimately. Basically, back off, but we don't want to fight, so, it doesn't matter. Actually, Trump striking a slightly conciliatory tone at times, talking about wanting to cooperate, how ISIS was a threat to Iran too, which is true, among other things. And anyway, at the end of the day, it was funny to see the reaction of some, because you can tell there are still some commentators that were tweet storming for the last couple of days, almost nonstop. Like in the wake of Soleimani being killed, they never slept, I think. Until now. Trump gives his response, and all of a sudden they go silent. I wonder why. Could it be because they were expecting Trump to actually start a war? And that was never, to tell the truth, very likely. The idea of a ground invasion of Iran was never on the table. The idea that a significant escalation was ever a significant option, I think, the underlying reality is that nobody really wants that. The public doesn't want it. Not just Democrats, not a partisan thing. The majority of the U.S. public wouldn't want it. The majority of the West wouldn't want it. Most of our allies wouldn't want it. There's no will to attack Iran directly. As far as taking out Soleimani, again, that's sort of a mixed bag situation. You can say, well, if there's intel that there were impending attacks, it'd be nice to actually see that, because I think smart Americans by now have learned not to just trust the government when it makes a claim. But I think my takeaway from this, ultimately, beyond it's good because there's not going to be a war, was how screwed up some of the commentators were on the issue. Like, there were people that, like the other day, they sounded like total hippies, total peaceniks. They're like, bombing for peace is like fucking for virginity, hippie trippy stuff, and like no more war, let's, feed the children instead. Very, very much peace-mongering. But then when it came to Iran striking U.S. targets, all of a sudden they started like waving flags around saying, yeehaw, pigs out of Iraq and stuff. And they're not even thinking of the possibility at the time of casualties. They're just thinking, clearly they've taken the other side, if you can use the term sides. There are a lot of commentators who have done this. I look at them and I say they're not really anti-war. They're just anti-U.S. involvement within the Middle East. Well, I am too. I'm also against U.S. troops being targeted by missiles. A sane approach would be we're simply not in the Middle East. We're not bothering Iran. We're not bothering Iraq. We're only in locations where we're welcome. And that's it. I would, by the way, say that until relatively recently, you do realize we were welcome in the nation of Iraq. We were allowed to be there. The base that was being hosted was hosted at will by the Iraqi government, and nobody had a problem with it. Our embassy all of a sudden comes under attack, and there are some problems. Ultimately, if this had escalated, it would be partially the result of protests or Iranian involvement, or whichever you want to blame, at the embassy before Soleimani was even killed. Then it would just devolve into a bunch of bullshit, because there'd be some people who would believe, well, Iran's responsible. That's it's sad we're at war, but it's their fault. And then there'd be people saying, well, it's sad we're at war, but the United States wouldn't leave us alone. And there'd just be a bunch of fucking bickering forever. I'm trying to envision what would have happened in this scenario if Bush or Obama had been president, or if Clinton had won the 2016 election. I'm thinking Bush would have attacked Iran, probably directly, because that was his idea of diplomacy, just fucking bomb things. And not even finish off the target, not actually bomb things and lock things down, but just conduct a few surgical strikes and call it a day and pretend that you've accomplished something. So Bush would have done a shock and awe job. Obama would have given the money, basically a bribe to keep quiet. Because, again, the deal that we made with him before was unofficial, pointless. It was basically a shakedown anyway. And then Clinton, judging from her statements on Iran, it was funny earlier, they tried to get the hashtag I voted for Clinton trending. Oh my God, yeah, I can imagine if Clinton had been elected and Iran had bombed one of her bases, because based on her prior statements from her time as Secretary of State, she would have gone to war over it. Well, Trump didn't. So Trump once again is peacemaker now. It's interesting, because I had speculated it probably would have been nothing more than sanctions anyway. If there was going to be any strike at all, it would have been very limited, and it would have been a symbolic retaliation too, just like their strike technically was. Here's the thing. If you look at Trump's track record over the last few years, he has consistently avoided open conflict. He has not been a pro-war president. Since Jimmy Carter, there hasn't been, I think, another president who's been more reluctant to actually use troops in foreign affairs. By and large, we've drawn down our ambitions and the scale of our administration of military apparatuses outside of places that are safe anyway, like, we're in Egypt or whatever. Okay, well, long-term, stable country, doesn't have a problem. We're not conducting military adventurism in Egypt. We're allowed there. We've been invited there. Other than that, though, Trump has largely scaled down what we've been doing in the Middle East. Only in the last month or so has there been any kind of wavering in that general logic. And this really, we killed Soleimani in retaliation for an embassy attack. That's not a war. And it's funny because a lot of people who were like flying Iranian flags in their Twitter profiles, like the Twitter names, and they're like, well, we're sorry. Right? It's like when, I'm not casting shade for this. I think it'd be more interesting as a civil debate than insulting or something. But when Richard Spencer and Michael Moore are basically saying the same thing, that's kind of telling to me. It seems like there are some people, and again, I'm not going to name names, certain commentators online, not all on YouTube or Twitter, by the way, that were hoping that there'd be a war. I don't know whether it's to virtue signal or whether to reinforce their view that Orange Man bad, because increasingly people who believe that Trump has fallen up short, they keep casting every possible negative attribute that they can think of off on Trump. So they are imagining him now to be pro-war or something. Oh, Donald Trump, he's an agent of other powers, subversive forces within the Middle East. He's going to start a war on their behalf. Well, this isn't a war. Soleimani's dead. Okay, he's already been replaced. That's not a war. Iran conducts some strikes, presumably knowing that, nobody's specifically in harm's way. Some of the missiles get downed anyway. Apparently, it was like, apparently 15 missiles were fired and 4 of them were knocked out of the sky, which I think is better than usual for Patriot missile batteries, so maybe they got some new technology or some shit. Nobody died. Nobody was injured. The most mysterious thing, I think, about this entire proceedings, and I guarantee within the next 48 hours, news will pretty much drop off the face of the earth. Bernie Sanders, for example, in the wake of this speech, you'd think this would be a major time for him to weigh in, and I criticized him for this. He starts talking about like No Child Left Behind or something like that. He makes several posts. Obviously, he would have been paying attention live to the speech. I guess there was nothing that he could target right away, so he decided to leave it alone. My biggest concern is over the tails of this Boeing 737 that during takeoff in Tehran, in Iran, was knocked out of the sky or had a mechanical failure, and now the Iranians don't want to turn over the black box to Boeing. I wonder why. I have a feeling, and this isn't a conspiracy theory, this is a fog of war sort of thing. I have a real deep fucking suspicion that the Iranian anti-air system accidentally triggered on a civilian jetliner on its way to Ukraine, killing a bunch of Iranians, Ukrainians, and Canadians especially in the process. Whoops, that's not good optics. Quick, we better bury this until at least a week later when people have forgotten all about it. And they will. They'll forget about it because the Dems are not going to be able to make this a major issue. They can't say, well, Trump kills a general that they can't find him defensible. Even if you think Soleimani was an okay person and he didn't do that bad and he helped us fight ISIS, okay, again, reality aside, look at perception. The optics of defending some general over in a dictatorial sort of theocratic country in the Middle East is not good. That's not good going into an election year. So the Democrats aren't going to do that. They can think whatever they want. Ultimately, in this situation, Trump wins. That's really what this is about. The Democrats aren't going to be able to talk about it very much, and they're not going to keep it in the news cycle, because if no war has broken out and it's just the tale of Trump slaps Iran with sanctions, says we should cooperate more, that's not really a tabloid story. You can see it in the posts by the legacy media right now across the internet. They wanted a war to begin. These people feast upon blood. They would love a war because it would make good news. Now they have to find something else to report on. With impeachment falling through and a lot of this other stupid shit that they've ruminated on being basically discarded. Nobody cares about it anymore. What are they going to talk about? Nothing exciting ever happens under the Trump regime. They assured me that by now there should be a Great Depression and World War III and nuclear Armageddon and cats and dogs living together. They told me everything would be terrible. Instead, things are going pretty well. No war with Iran. Generally a drawdown in foreign theaters. For the most part. Not entirely, but for the most part, Trump hasn't been a warmonger. There are warmongers around him. He kicked Bolton to the curb. As soon as he kicked Bolton out, all of a sudden the deep state came around him twice as hard. I wonder why that was. Maybe Bolton advised him to attack Iran. I think that Trump, honestly, generally speaking on foreign policy, he's more of a peacenik than the Democrats. It's funny to see Hillary Clinton, of all people, whine about Donald Trump. Oh, he's going to start a war. He's endangering us overseas. No, he's not. You would have fucking pressed the little red button just to show that you were one of the boys, Hillary. And we all know it. That would have happened. That was one of the main reasons I voted for Trump. Because on foreign policy, I trusted him more. I think I made the right decision. And I think right now there are people, online commenters, independent people. I'm not saying they're shills. I'm not saying they're bought out. But they've gobbled up the black pill of Trump having failed and he's sold out and he's going to be just like Bush was because, he's a Republican and all this. And he's not. He's not acting the neocon here. And by the way, I don't care if he comes out and says, well, Iran was partially responsible for the problems in Yemen. It's not an act of war to claim so. I don't care if he makes that claim. Doesn't matter. Who's going to blame? Somebody's going to blame Yemen or the Houthi rebels or whatever. Someone else is going to blame Saudi adventurism. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really make any difference. It's also not our fucking fight. Didn't Congress already rescind certain arms deals with the Saudis anyway? So fucking shut up about it. Congress right now, in closing, and this is something I agree with for different reasons. Congress is trying to restrict executive power with regards to the ability to conduct strikes and stuff like that. Good. But it's terrible that they waited until Trump was in office to do it. The most reluctant president to use his power is the one that scares them. Obama, who conducted drone strikes even on U.S. citizens every single day? That's fine. Nobody cares. Iran deal where you're giving them money that technically you're not allowed to allocate at all because you're not the U.S. House of Representatives. Yeah, you can give them Pentagon discretionary spending pallet by pallet in a deal that we don't sign off on and is totally unofficial and meaningless. Yeah, you can invade Iraq. That's okay. Yeah, you can invade Afghanistan. Okay, fine. Yeah, you can bomb people in Somalia. You can bomb people in Yemen. Where was all of this ire at all of their adventurism? The real adventurism was from the last two administrations. Technically going all the way back through Ronald fucking Reagan, we've had nothing but foreign adventurism. It's time for that paradigm to die. Trump has shown generally, not completely, but generally an unwillingness to play the sort of diplomatic game that's gotten us into so many messes. He has been, on foreign policy, demonstrably, so far, objectively better than either of his predecessors, going all the way back quite some time. You have to go back at least to Ronald Reagan to find a person who, on foreign policy, at least kind of understood what they were doing. I guess you can kind of make a roundabout pitch for Clinton knowing what he was doing, although he seems to have largely listened to whatever Hillary Clinton wanted him to do on everything. She was the brains behind the operation. He was just the smooth talker, the figurehead. I have a feeling Hillary Clinton should never be been allowed to run actually anyway because she's already been president for 2 terms. She's disqualified. It's the reason why she didn't get elected. People are fucking tired of it. So congratulations to Trump. I mean, you managed to stir up the left, get him to defend Soleimani, get him to presume you were going to start World War III, and they worked themselves up into a froth and a fury. And now Trump really nails it home when he says, look, that money Obama gave to the Iranians was just used to buy missiles to attack our bases. Well, technically, it's $1 is the same as the other once it's bundled into an economy. But yeah, probably the missiles cost less than that pallet of cash was worth. What was it, 1.2 billion was sent just in cash, along with billions more electronically. By the way, still not exactly sure about how he managed to secure those funds. Where did they even come from? CIA probably took care of it like they always do. Maybe they sent the rest of the money in cocaine. Yeah, Khomeini, he had a good time. That's about all. Peace out.